Welcome to the Happy Disruptors Podcast. If you're a creative thinker with an unconventional approach to your industry, you just might be a happy disruptor. Join your friends at the Great Outdoors Foundation for honest conversations about tackling critical issues like conservation with an uncritical disposition. If you like to smile and get things done, this is the podcast for you.
Welcome to the Happy Disruptors Podcast. I am Kaitie.
And I'm Hannah.
And today we are joined by two just excellent farmers in the field, like here in our own backyard, Mr. Lee Tesdell and Mr. Nick Helland. Introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
You want to go first, Lee, or?
Sure. Okay. I'm Lee Tesdell. I'm a fifth generation landowner in northern Polk County. Nick and I both come from Norwegian immigrant families, and we're actually neighbors too. The way the farm land worked in my family was Eric and Barbara Tesdell came from Norway in 1855, and they were actually members of the Palestine Lutheran Church community just south of Huxley. Mm-hmm. The church is still there on Highway 210. Mm-hmm. And it was the immigrants called it Palestine, referring, I'm sure, to the idea of promised land. Mm-hmm. At that time, they probably didn't know how much work it was going to be plowing the prairie sod. But anyway, the first thing they did was they built a little church. Yeah. And so we're embedded in that community. And then my great-grandpa, Sievert, was 14 when they arrived, and he, I think he got tired of farm chores, volunteered for the Union Army to get out of there, and thankfully survived Vicksburg and some of the other battles in the Civil War, and came home and accumulated quite a large family, farm and family. Mm-hmm. By the time he passed away, they built a big retirement home in Slater, Iowa, mm-hmm. on Tama Street, still there. And according to what I've heard, great-grandma Ingeborg was quite a wild driver in her Model T flying down the country roads. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet her. She passed away before I was born. But. So anyway, and then Grandpa Ben started out farming. And then he had a farm sale in 1920, decided to move here to Des Moines to be a businessman. So I did not grow up on that farm, but my dad was a professor. We moved around some, but when I got married, I decided to come back to Iowa. Mm. So we raised our boys there, and they went through North Polk and then Iowa State. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I got here. I recently retired from Minnesota State Mankato as a professor. And have really, I would say, jumped into conservation even more so than before I was retired, and worked with Nick and his family. We started cover cropping 13 years ago, and no-tilling before that, and it's a good partnership. We don't agree on everything, way to manage the land, but we agree on enough that we're still friends and business partners. Yeah. And so I guess that's a little bit about me. That's probably enough, and Nick probably wants to say something. Sorry, Nick.
Oh, I usually have plenty to say. So my name is Nick Helland. I'm a seventh generation family farmer, just north of Des Moines, like Lee said. I farm with my dad, my uncle, and my cousin, so there's several parties that are kind of all operating together. We are mostly corn and soybean rotation. We've dabbled a little bit in some small grains. My cousin and I both have hog operations. I've been outside of the farm in ag industry for a while as well, and now I'm full-time on the farm and trying to kind of figure out how we can manage all these different things together. So trying to kind of put this into the next generation's hand if my son wants to. So, that's my goal, is how can we make all of this kind of work together so that more people can do this in the future if that's what they want.
Yeah. Well, Lee, you said something about that you guys are good friends, but you don't always agree on the best way to manage the farm. And I think this is an important conversation for us to have as we start to show the nuances of what it means to do conservation on the farm. Both of you are multi-generation farmers. Tell us how your perspective has changed on conservation over the decades that you've been stewarding the land.
I made you go first last time, so I suppose I'm better this time. So our journey really kind of started with a happy accident. When I was growing up, we were very much in the camp that we did tillage before both our corn and soybeans. And then actually one spring, we had a major breakdown. And our biggest tractor that we used for tillage, we'd got all the tillage done for the corn, but then it broke and we weren't going to be able to get it repaired before we were able to do the soybeans. And, we had read about these crazy people that had no-tilled their soybeans. So we're like, well, we're going to try it. And lo and behold, it actually worked. And it worked well enough that they were actually our best beans that year. And then it kind of gave us the confidence that, okay, we're going to do more of that next year. And within 2 years, our whole operation was no-till soybeans.
Wow.
But that is kind of a model of how we've tried things and how we've evolved over the years. And, Lee talked about, we started cover crops, 13 years ago, and it was kind of a similar model where it's like, okay, we're going to start a little bit on one farm and try this. And some of it was through cost share programs, through different places out there. But it got to be hey, we have confidence that this can fit into our operation. We always have to kind of change and evolve with it. If we're going to bring in something like no-till or cover crops, there's usually second and third effects. It's like, okay, we need to change this so that the timings are right. We need to make sure we have this piece of equipment set up differently in order to do this. But being able to kind of walk through some of those things and say, okay, this is how we've succeeded with it. Let's try something else to see if that can work as well. So kind of having that progression has really kind of helped change our perspective on how we go about conservation.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, Nick makes some good points. I want to say right up front that Iowa's corn and soy farmers are experts at raising a lot of grain. And it's due to specialized equipment, it's due to hybrids, it's Mother Nature doesn't always bring the best weather that they want, but and it's due to our wonderful soils in what we call the Des Moines lobe. So the Des Moines lobe is kind of a V-shaped area coming down from southern Minnesota that was last glaciated about 13,000 years ago. It gave us this wonderful prairie topsoil, but it also left a lot of wet areas out in the landscape. And so our landscape is really, we're really farming in a leaky system because we have put in a lot of drainage tile so we can farm more acres of those wet areas. And then we have, of course, an annual plant landscape now, annual crops rather than perennial as it used to be with the prairie, the prairie plants. And then about World War II, we figured out how to make anhydrous ammonia. I think we knew how to do it before World War II, but it wasn't being used much. And so we have this situation of a leaky system, especially in a corn year. Then we put on an average of 180 pounds of nitrogen to feed the corn, and we can grow a lot of corn. Polk County average is right just under 200 bushel an acre. But I was riding in your uncle's combine one time on my farm, and we hit 299 on the yield monitor, and I thought, wow, I've got almost 300 bushel corn on my farm.
That's pretty easy to deceive, though. That yield monitor hits really high numbers, but it hits really low numbers, too. So you have to look at the field average. You can't just look at that pretty shiny number.
But back to what I said, though, we know how, my neighbors know how to raise a lot of grain. But on the other side of the balance sheet, now we're seeing the problem with water quality. And unfortunately, there's no mechanism yet that is widely used that helps to mitigate that problem. We have voluntary programs, and Nick and I are good examples We both have signed up for voluntary work, conservation work. But we're just a drop in the bucket, so to speak, and, with our edge of field practices and our cover cropping and so on. So therein lies the rub with our wonderful grain production system, which really is very productive. I'm not putting down my neighbors for that, but how do we also have clean water?
Right.
Is the big question, and I think that's what you guys are interested in too, and we are too. We're doing a lot of water testing, and I have Iowa State pulling samples on my saturated buffers, which have bioreactor, and Nick knows about this stuff too. We know that cover crops help sequester some of that excess nutrient, but it's a real challenge out there, and city people are mad at us because they couldn't water their lawns. I will notice that they didn't need to water their lawns because there was a lot of rain. But anyway, I thought that was ironic. But if you were reading the comments in the Central Iowa Waterworks Facebook postings every day, there were some angry people.
Yep.
And in a way, you don't blame them. We need to work together. We need to figure this out.
I think what the comments, because we read the same ones, the comments, what that illuminated for me was how much people really don't understand farming systems or the American food system, right? Yep. We've spent, decades building the food system that we have. So we have, food to feed people and things like that. And for years we were told you got to, plant fence row to fence row. That was part of, that was your duty. Yeah. And so now and the whole ag system was built to produce enough grain for the world, right? So now we're it's going to take decades to change. You guys have talked about a few of the things that you've done, but that cascade of what you have to do different. You don't just make a decision to do cover crops or no-till. There's all these other things. Yeah. How do you decide what you're going to do, and then how do you find the resources? I'm taking us off script a little bit, but I think it's important for people to understand that this isn't an over the night or a snap judgment. Like, how do you do that? How do you educate yourself and then make those changes?
Well, I think I'm in a little bit of a lucky position, okay? Because I'm not like Nick's dad and uncle, who sometimes stay up at night, thinking about the loans.
Right.
But because I don't depend on my 80. So I get some rent money from Nick, and so I can experiment. And so I've got 3 acres of prairie strips, which are perennial. I've got 7 acres of perennial crop, so hay and kernza, and I have about 10 acres of CRP of various kinds here and there. And I help finance that with rent money from the row crop acres. So I'm lucky in a way, I'm retired, so I don't depend on that financially. I would say for people like Nick's dad and uncle, it's tough. You have some good years, try to save up. You don't buy new equipment, you buy used equipment and all those things that these guys do. And still the tough years can still be tough. But they do have the federal government backing them up in some ways. So there's ARC PLC, there's federal crop insurance, and more things that Nick can talk about. And then there were some special checks from President Trump the first time around. And, there are a few extra little things that help folks out. And it depends a lot on the price of your land. So if you have family land that's paid for, let's say a third of your land is family land paid for, a quarter, that really helps a lot. And you rent 2,000-3,000 more acres. Well, you got to pay rent for that every year. But if you're renting everything, then that's a really big challenge. So your land price is, and that's tough to make it in a tough year.
Yeah.
Really tough, right? Nick's got some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to kind of unpack there from the operator's side, I mean, Lee is the outlier for most landowners. Most landowners are not near as engaged, and they may like the idea of some of these sustainable things, but when it comes to action, they're probably less engaged and not willing to kind of put some of the effort forth or the financial piece that Lee does. Lee and I split a lot of the costs for some of this stuff, whereas most landowners are kind of like, well, that seems great. I'd like you to do that, but I'm not going to help. There's no cost share, and I'd still like top dollar for rent and all these other things. So it gets to be a pretty good challenge, especially, Lee alluded to it. Right now, prices are not great, and, sure enough, my seed costs went up this year. My fertilizer costs went up this year. All the input costs that it takes to produce that crop have gone up. And if we're talking about adding these conservation pieces, which are important, it is time, money, and effort that I can't spend on other pieces of the operation. So I have to be very diligent about where do I need to spend my time and my effort so that I'm maximizing my return. What we like to do is we've run a lot of numbers on our farm to say, hey, where are the places that yield where are the places that we consistently have problems, and can we actually take out those parts of the field that maybe aren't yielding as well, they don't return, especially in down years like this. Let's try to simplify some of these fields and make them cleaner, easier to farm by using some of these practices. Okay, can we apply that to say, I may not be able to raise the price per bushel, but I can make myself more efficient, and I can make myself a little bit of money by saving myself time. So there's components of these conservation pieces that aren't always the dollars and cents. How can we leverage those to make, where I can spend my capital, be it actual financial capital or time or stress level, and kind of put them into the right places there. Because these things don't work in every single field. Like there's some places where it's like, that just does not work here, and I can't put that square peg into a round hole. But there are other places where it's like, this will actually save me time and money by taking it out of production and putting it into conservation.
So looking at it as like a net profit as opposed to just yield.
Yeah, I will give up some bushel production by taking that piece out, but I may save myself time, money, or more importantly right now to me, if I save myself the input money and be able to kind of keep my powder dry and put it where I can use it more effectively, that makes sense to me.
There is a fairly well-known commentator who says, rip out the yield monitor and put in a profit monitor, which makes, that's apocryphal, but it makes sense.
It's just part of the equation, though. You have to know your inputs while you're looking at your yield monitor.
Right. Yeah. So the yield monitor is actually just part of the pie chart, and there's all this other stuff in there. But I want to go back to the point that we've discussed, and that is the productivity of our industrial grain production system, which is quite remarkable. There are folks that blame the water quality problem on farmers, and I would shift that a little bit. Sure, farmers make a decision. Do I put on 180 pounds or 150 pounds or 210 pounds of nitrogen on my corn or whatever? But I would shift that a little bit and say that if you're going to survive in this industrial grain production system, you have to push yield. And I would say that farmers aren't necessarily the ones pulling all the strings. I call it a corn trap sometimes, that there's this system that we're caught in that consists of a small handful of seed companies, small handful of chemical companies, which are sometimes the same. A small handful of fertilizer companies, and a small handful of grain marketing companies like Bunge, Cargill, ADM, and those folks that have, in a way, forced my neighbors into this kind of system. If you raise 500 acres of feed grade oats, it's tough to market them, for example.
Right.
That would be better for the soil to put in a 3 or 4 or 5 crop rotation system, but our financially speaking, our system does not encourage that. So
it's not that it doesn't encourage it. straight up doesn't allow it right now. There isn't a market for it. Like if I were to put in 200 acres of oats, I might have a market for it, but it's not really possible.
And that's changing a little bit. So Land and Plaguey and some others are putting in a food grade mill in Albert Lea, Minnesota, and they're going to start contracting for food grade oats. And there's the place in northeast Iowa that buys food grade, and Cedar Rapids, the Cheerio people.
There's small niches that have markets, but the broad acre there's
it's tough.
Not
right. It's tough, and so when I say corn trap, that's what I'm referring to as. In a way, you guys don't have a lot of options for what you plant. Your equipment is specialized. You know, they have a 24-row core planter. They have a 40-foot soybean air seeder. You know, and they have a 120-foot boom on their sprayer, and it's all geared towards corn and soy. And so it would be even hard in some ways from the equipment side to introduce a third crop. You know, you could use some small grain, but then where do you market it?
Right.
You see my point?
The equipment is exceptionally overcomable. It's the market.
Yeah.
The lack of market is more of the problem. The growers could produce it, and they could gear up to make that third crop if it were small grains or whatever it may be. That's incredibly overcomable. That technology is there. All that stuff is very doable. It's the lack of market.
Yeah. So I think blaming the farmer is somewhat misplaced. I mean, there's some responsibility there, sure. But I look at the landowners. 60% of Iowa is rented, by the way. Didn't you know that? So 60% of the land in Iowa is not farmed by the owner.
Yeah.
You know, on my farm, it's kind of 30 acres versus 50 acres. But so it's if the landowners aren't on board with conservation, Nick was saying earlier, you know, they want top dollar and so on. That's tough, you know, to make that work. So I think that's somewhat misplaced, and farmers feel it. They don't. You know, I go to coffee at Come and Go once in a while near Huxley, and you know, one day I said, well, you know, 80% of the nitrate comes off of CAFOs and corn fertilizer, and what about the lawns and the golf courses?
Yeah.
You know, it's the first thing. And there's actually been research on that, and we know that lawns and golf courses really don't contribute that much. I mean, we have 13 million acres of corn. We don't have anywhere near 1 million acres of golf courses and lawns, I would guess. And we have about 10 million acres of soybeans. So there's 23 million acres of row crop in Iowa. And
but we also, you go back to that Des Moines lobe that you had a while ago. Those are some of the highest natural organic matter soils in the world.
Right.
Some of this is part of the natural system. So
Yes,
let's not just say crop acre, farmer bad.
Right.
Some of this is naturally what would be happening, especially if you look at the weather cycle that we're coming off of. We're coming off of 2 to 3 very dry years.
Right.
And then this year, we've been very wet. Naturally, what's going to happen is you're going to flush that high organic matter system, and you're going to have the spike that we have this year. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying that we don't share a big part of this conversation. We do, and I want to be engaged in that conversation. But we have to kind of start at the base level here, which is our soils are going to be producing a high amount of nitrates no matter what, just because they are such fantastic soils, which is why we are the best area in the world to grow corn and soybeans.
Right.
So some of this is, you know, we're in this corn trap that you alluded to because literally we are the perfect place to grow corn and soybeans, and these soils lend themselves to that. So we have to learn to work with the system that we're in. And pointing fingers is really counterproductive. We've tried that in this area. You know, there was a fairly famous lawsuit, and I think that set us back. And now these rural and urban areas are working together much better. And I have a wetland that we just finished construction on that was partly funded by some of these urban areas, and that's examples of how this can and should work together versus, you know, the antagonism.
Right. No, you're right, and it's but so far it's voluntary. So you and I are volunteer are pioneers, and some of this stuff, and it's just not cutting the mustard, so to speak. We need way more conservation of all kinds, and so we need to step things up. When I was interviewed a few weeks ago by KCCI, Amanda Rucker, close-up program, I said, at the end, I think it's going to take more carrots and some sticks. Because, but again, I don't blame the producers as much. I really do not.
But we are getting better at that. Yeah. And I go back to Polk County creating a program called the Batch and Build. You know, in the first, I don't know how many years of the technology being out there for treating water with bioreactors and saturated buffers.
I was in that program.
Yep, yeah. They tried for, I think, 10 years almost. I won't have those dates exactly right. And they got a small pittance of these things done.
I think they got 5 in those 10 years.
Yeah. And credit to Lee, because he was one of the very first ones. Well, then they kind of said, okay, let's reevaluate this process, put them all together and said, I'm going to take this whole watershed, work with all the landowners, knock down all the barriers, because process is punishment. And if you were doing these one by one by one, and me as a landowner had to do my normal farm job, but then still try to drive this practice to completion, it kept falling through the cracks. So programs like Batch and Build, and they did 60 in 1 year, and now they've got Batch and Build programs. I think there's quite a few going on in the state where they've taken this Batch and Build model. So it's not all doom and gloom. We are getting better, and there is more carrots out there where we're kind of talking with some of these groups and saying, hey, this program worked really well. How can you partner with it? And they started as all public funding, and now there's private funding with Batch and Builds. You know, you have Heartland Co-op that set up a whole conservation agronomy department specifically to help drive some of these things. So again, I think we all share in this, but there is progress and there is some momentum in some of these things.
So let's talk about that a little bit. You are pioneers. You are some of the early adapters. That Batch and Build showed that you can get some of your neighbors on board. What does it take to transition from the early adopters to more mainstream conservation becoming more mainstream? You started to go into that. Process is punishment. Batch and Build helped, but what does it take? What makes people want to pull that trigger? Because it is such a cascade of different decision making.
One of the things that I think helped a lot, and I'll transition to that Batch and Build a little bit, is you had a group of landowners that saw Lee and us kind of go through installing one of these bioreactor saturated buffers originally, and so they kind of said, okay, hey guys, what is this actually like? Is it going to take out acres and acres? Are they going to tear things up? Is there going to be problems afterwards? And we as landowners and operators were able to say, no, this was actually fairly easy. You know, I didn't have to drive every single step. I pretty much had to agree, hey, this is how the piece is going to be built. Yeah, that makes sense. Or change this key thing. So you had input to make sure that it made sense. But then you had a lot of the administrative, the engineering, all of those pieces taken off of your plate and actually being done by experts. And then you had contractors who, instead of building one project and trying to make that make sense for them, they could come in and say, hey, I'm not going to spend 2 days building this and then go move somewhere else. I'm going to spend a whole bunch of time building all of these things and make them make sense together. So you really kind of removed a lot of the disincentive from the growers. You removed it from the contractors, and you kind of said, okay, the city or the government took some of those key process steps and led that. So to me, that was what really kind of made that possible.
Yeah. So efficiency, easy decision making, bringing the technical assistance to you. And not driving every step.
And you know, my wetland is a great example to me, because we went through 2 to 3 different design processes, and I think we ended up on number 6 by the time we were done. And it was a process of, hey, the engineers wanted to do this. Well, does that work for you as the grower? No, we need to change this. Well, then the Army Corps of Engineers weighed in, and they needed this change because it was in a watershed. So that whole iteration and process was all very collaborative. And as a grower, and that's a piece that I actually own, so I'm the landowner on that one, I got to say, hey, this is the concerns that I have. This is the places that make sense to do this, and this is where I really need you to hey, the drawing says this, but believe me as the owner, I need you to do this to really solve the problem correctly.
Yeah.
And I was very happy with how everything actually came together when you were able to collaborate like that.
That's great.
So back to your question, what does it take?
Yeah.
I should mention that the edge of field practices really really require 3 steps. And so far we're talking about the installation, which of course is critical. You got to put them into place. And Nick's right, the batch and build really did make a lot of sense. We had the same contractor, hands-on from Jewel area up there somewhere, Randall. And Jacob just came through, and in one summer they put in 51 practices up and down 4 Mile Creek watershed. It was quite amazing. And they took care of the paperwork, right? And we got paid for each tile. It was great. But there are 2 more steps. And so I'm fearful that all these 51 practices are not actually being completed in that the landowners, the farmers, operators need to be trained in management. So that's step number 2, how to manage the stop logs in the control boxes, and verifying that they're working. So who's pulling the water samples? Are we taking out half the nitrate? Are we taking out a third? What's the water in nitrate versus the water out nitrate? Those things are not being done very often. I know this because I'm lucky. Iowa State grad students have my edge of field practices as a research project, and so I get data. I'm watching the data, and I know that, for example, in one of my better, more efficient edge of field practices, it's a saturated buffer. I brought 3 tiles in together and made a bump in the field for these guys when they plant and harvest, but we're watching that carefully. So we treat 45% of the tile water. Now, why is that? That's because in heavy rains, a lot of the water, the 55%, goes through the bypass. It can't handle 100%. That's number 1. Number 2, of the 45%, we're taking out about 75 to 80% of the nitrate.
Wow.
Okay, so that works pretty well.
Yeah.
But we're not even treating half the water.
Right. Right.
Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
So it's so critical to have the 3 steps: the installation, the management of the control boxes, and then the verification. Almost none of my neighbors have any way to verify.
Right.
There are no test wells.
Right.
So I'm lucky. Again,
Yeah.
I'm lucky. And maybe I'm kind of a template, and maybe you can kind of extrapolate from mine. I don't know. Maybe that's helpful.
Yeah.
Right? But you see where I'm coming from.
Right.
We have partial solutions.
Well,
we don't have complete solutions.
And you look at
See what I'm
what
saying?
you're speaking about, what the both of you have been speaking about. You also have batch and build, which I think some people conflate batch and build with the actual practices.
Correct.
Batch and build is a delivery mechanism of conservation practices. You can put in any type of conservation practice, but use the same delivery and funding mechanism. And then you have saturated, you have the actual practices, and then you have the verification. Is what we're doing working? Is there more? Is there something different? I mean, even to some of the point where we were talking to some Iowa State grad students that were testing in bioswales, what's the best mix in there? You know, what's the best thing? So there still is, to your point, so much to do.
Well, and Lee, I love that you highlighted the benefits of the saturated buffer, but we have lots of tools in the toolkit, right? Like we've talked a lot about edge of field practices. Something that I think, has been really illuminating to me is just the imbalance of incentive around edge of field practices when you think about the fact that 60% of the land is owned by someone who does not operate that land, right? So there is not often the incentive to be investing in these permanent or semi-permanent structures.
Right.
You both have been trying out a lot of different practices, and I think that's kind of a unique picture where you get to see how all of these elements are working together. What is your perspective on what is the path forward for conservation? What does that look like over the next 10 years?
Nick has a plan.
My plan is to keep doing what I'm doing and talking to neighbors and saying it does work and you can do all of these things. I think a lot of it is celebrating some of those wins and saying, hey, these are the things that are possible, and let's continue to highlight that with more and more folks and say, hey, this can work in your area too. It's not just that worked in the Des Moines watershed because, Des Moines has helped funding the bill. No, these are things that can translate to other areas. So there are very easy wins that can be, applied elsewhere. I think it does take people seeing success and seeing things like the number and the data and saying, okay, the saturated buffer is reducing this amount of nitrates off of that. Okay, it's not just a lipstick project that is not actually changing something. There's actual facts and data to show, this is what it's taking out.
Yeah. And
for me, freedom to operate is a big thing. And I do not want, Lee mentioned sticks earlier. You can keep your sticks. I don't want them because regulations tend to make things harder and usually worse and very restrictive on how you need to adapt every year, because you can make a plan, but every year that plan is going to change, and I need more flexibility to work with Mother Nature in some of these things. So I believe in bringing that data to show these processes can work and can help this whole thing, get a little better.
Right. Yeah. I can give you an example from just this morning. I came from the annual CDI conference going on right now at
You
Iowa
better
State.
explain what CDI is, because no one knows.
I sure will. Conservation Districts of Iowa. So I'm a Polk County Soil and Water Conservation District Commissioner. There's 5 of us. We're elected. As I joked with Amanda Ruka the other day, we're on the ballot, but usually on the back page at the bottom. But seriously, there was the Lynn County SWCD had a what do they call it? They're not proposals, amendments, I think, to CDI policy, saying that an operator couldn't get cost share money if they tilled soybean stubble in the fall, because we're against tillage on soybean stubble, because obviously that's going to encourage soil erosion, wind and water. And actually most farmers don't do that in this area. But I stood up and offered an amendment, and I said, wait a minute, my neighbors like to go around the field twice with a chisel plow or a field cultivator or disc. Their objective is to reduce compaction on the end rows, and they leave the tool in the ground when they do the other side. And so you see soybean fields all the time in this part of Iowa with tillage around once or 2 passes around the field, right? I mean, everyone's seen that. And I said, wait a minute, we want to encourage cost share on those acres. Let's not penalize the guys that are, personally, if I were farming that ground, I would not do that, okay? Because I know that tillage actually encourages compaction. But therein lies an argument with some of the old timers who are not going to agree with me. Anyway, so, but let's be flexible, right? Do you see my point?
Yeah.
The amendment did not pass. It had 69 yes votes and it had 120 no votes or something. The folks just didn't want to change. Fair enough. But you can see, my point is we need to be flexible with each other, okay? Yeah. They were after absolutely no tillage, although they did allow for liquid hog manure injection. They did, which is good. I would say I agree with that too. We need to work together on these things, be a little flexible. Yeah. But my fear is, and so who welcomed us this morning? Secretary of Ag, Mike Nag, was there 9:30 this morning. And he's all about how wonderful it is, the progress we made. And of course, he talked about batch and build and how there are, I think, 22 more batch and builds out there now in Iowa and so on. And he's right, there's room for optimism. But I don't see enough scientifically based research driving our conservation work yet. And I know you don't like sticks, but at some point somebody's got to pay for that polluted water. and it's not just the farmer, the operator. No, it's not. I'm willing to pay a higher water bill. I drink Des Moines water way out in the country, and my bill's $25 a month. That's not a lot of money. It's just two of us, but my bill's $25, $26 a month. I have an outdoor well for the livestock, so that saves me, there. But so I'd like to see a little more seriousness based on science about, who's going to help pay for this stuff. I think that's where I come down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you touched on a really important point, Lee, is it doesn't have to be perfect in order to make progress. Like that really struck me in your story of the conversation at CDI,
right.
Because that can really deflate some of the energy around conservation that's happening, right? I mean, have you experienced that? What is the sentiment among your peers, and how do you feel that your steps in conservation have influenced them?
Are they laughing at us, Nick?
Well, some
do,
but you're always going to get that.
Your dad always said they were watching us.
Well, our bad joke is that sometimes we're not on the cutting edge, we're on the bleeding edge because we've gone past the cutting edge. But I will say they are watching us, and one example I use is no-till. We were the first in the area to try no-till, and that was, I don't want to say how many years ago because it's going to make me feel old, but that was a while ago, and now I would say the vast majority of the acres in the area are no-till planted soybeans, and more corn is no-till planted or strip-till planted.
So at least every other year.
Yeah, so you are seeing people say, aha, I see what my neighbor's doing, and I'm accepting that and going forward. Cover crops, same story to me.
And we have a couple neighbors who are strip-tilling too.
Yep.
Which is much reduced, but
yep. And you do have the diehards on the other side that no amount of facts, data, or experience will change their mind, and you have to just kind of say, all right, let me know if you want to have the conversation. Be happy to. But
yeah, I stopped in on a neighbor a couple of years ago who shall remain unnamed, who was working on putting a new chisel on his chisel plow, and we got around somehow, I don't know, to no-till, and he said, "Oh, the beans always yield better when you rip the corn stalks." And I like to keep peace with that neighbor, so I didn't say, but I wanted to say, and have you done strip trials out on your farm? Because I know he hasn't. So he can't prove it.
Right,
so, we run into that too with our neighbors, right, Nick?
Yeah.
So how long do you think from the time you adopt something to more of your neighbors following? Is it a slow progress? Does it just happen? What does that look like?
My favorite answer in agriculture is it depends, because there's a lot of factors that go into that. If someone sees, hey, that is something that doesn't take a ton of investment or equipment changeover or, a lot of inputs to do that, it can be adopted rather quickly. But if it's something that takes shifting big swaths of your operation, that's a lot slower. And there's a lot of people that are like, I'm going to let you do that 2-3 years before I figure out if you're actually succeeding. Because year 1, you're always going to find what not to do.
Right.
Year 2, you're going to get a little better. And by year 3, you're starting to really figure it out. Are those folks willing to jump into that learning curve and, until you've gone through it? A lot of times not. So sometimes I'd say it takes 2-3 years through a rotation, trying something like that, before people are really willing to jump in and kind of say, okay, I see what you're doing, and I think that can work.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about the way city people are thinking about the water quality and what we do out on the landscape? Yeah. What's your take?
I think that there is I don't think that most people are educated enough to really have an opinion.
Okay.
I think
they might have an opinion.
Well, they for sure have an opinion, but I don't think that people understand how difficult farming is in general, right? Yeah. I mean, there was a report, I'm sure you guys know this, there was a report that came out the other day that last year's net income for the average farmer was negative $324. And so
per acre or what?
I don't remember. Do you remember?
I think it was per acre.
Per acre.
Could be, yeah.
So when when I when now the last 4 years I've been sort of just ingrained in the world, in the farming world. I don't farm. I'm 2 generations off the farm. And so I'm just have tried to learn everything that I can. And I went and got my MBA at Iowa State in food systems and ag just so I could understand it, right? If I'm going to be dedicating my life to water quality, I better understand this. And I don't think people understand, to our point earlier today that we were talking, this isn't just a farmer decision.
Yeah.
And when you meet farmers, they're not much different than the people that live in my suburb. They're running kids around. They're making sure mom and dad are getting to their appointments.
Yeah.
And at the same time, oh, by the way, you're responsible for the water quality in this whole watershed, and you should stop what you're doing and change everything and learn new ways to do everything. I mean,
And feed the world.
And feed the world.
Low key.
And I live in a conservation neighborhood that has an HOA. So our whole area is, our drainage ditches and everything are all prairie. We live in a prairie, the whole
nice.
thing. Yeah,
Nice.
it's really nice. But do you know how worked up they get when they're told by the HOA of how to manage their prairie? Can you imagine what they, and so I use.
No purple flowers.
Yeah.
To your point, it takes 60 to 80 decisions to raise a crop every year on every single field. And conservation is going to have, an effect on a lot of those different decisions. So saying, oh, just go do this. It's not that simple. It takes a lot. And by the way, Mother Nature is carrying a big stick in this conversation, and she's going to bat last no matter what decision you make.
Right. So I think it's up to all of us to figure out those carrots in which conservation is part of the business decision. Make conservation pay, and however that looks, and recognize how our food systems contribute to what's going on, and where can we help as consumers influence what we want to see. But quite frankly, we have a 1930s conservation delivery mechanism, and we are farming in 2025. And we must come to terms with that and start to address those situations. And in those areas in which there is regulation, take the Chesapeake Bay, they still have a dead zone.
Right.
They still have, and so no matter what decision is made, it's gonna have to be multi-pronged approach.
Right.
Yeah.
The Cuyahoga River in Ohio no longer lights on fire.
Right.
but and that was probably the depths of the depths.
Right, right.
Some years ago. But I'm glad you mentioned food systems, because one of the problems with industrial grain production is we don't make a lot of human food out of it. We fill gas tanks. I think most of the corn from my farm probably goes to Lincoln Way.
Right.
Corn ethanol. And I don't blame anybody for wanting to get 15, 20 cents more per bushel. I get it. Or whatever it is. Sometimes it's more, I'm guessing.
I'm going to pause here and object slightly.
Okay. Can you tell we don't always agree?
This is why we
warned
wanted
you.
both of you guys on.
This is important.
It doesn't directly go to food systems.
Right.
But over half of our corn
Indirect. You're right.
goes to feed.
Yep.
Right.
A third of the ethanol byproducts go to feed.
Right.
So we have a massive animal industry in this state too that does go directly to human food. So I think we need to be a little bit careful in the wording there, because corn and soybeans, they've been kind of the focus on what we're talking about here. But those are the biggest components in some of the protein industry. So I would just be cautious in the wording.
Yeah. And when I discuss it, I do bring that up because I absolutely get it. And
it's easy to point fingers at ethanol.
Yeah.
But by the way, ethanol is also a cleaner burning fuel source. So
but
That's a whole nother.
that's a different conversation that we're not here for. So
but by the way, I'm farming the sun with my solar panels, and my electric car does have no emissions. So there's another possibility out there.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about the entire train of that and production. So all the way back
on our
to
next
mining
episode.
We should. Yeah.
No, I was so encouraged by your initial story, Nick, of the conservation practice of no-till came out of necessity. It was an innovation that was born out of necessity. And I think, the conditions and the environment that farmers are up against right now, like that is going to be ripe with innovation. And so I'm encouraged. I know that there's a long way to go, but I do think that we're already seeing how the delivery system of conservation is being shaken up in a way that it hasn't for, almost 100 years.
And another piece of that whole happy accident story there was the convergence of someone that Lee was picking on a little while ago, and that was the emergence of Roundup Ready technology. Without that,
Right.
we would not be able to
hard to
no-till
cover crop.
farm. So I know glyphosate is a big hot button issue right now,
Right.
but if you took that away from farmers, you would immediately slash the no-till.
Wow.
And cover
feasibility.
cropping. And
Yeah.
cover cropping.
Yeah.
Because that's how
I
we
can't
terminate
cover
the
crop without glyphosate.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we have to be very careful when we're having these conversations to say, hey, it's really easy to say, oh my gosh, I don't want that. But without, at the time, Monsanto bringing Roundup Ready technology into the marketplace at the right time, we would never have gotten through that step of the journey. So there's a lot of players at this table that, aren't just the farmer and the landowner.
And that alone is like just a synopsis of why it's just, why don't you just do X, Y, Z?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a robust local food system. It's much smaller than our industrial grain production. But so, for example, I've been selling to Iowa Food Co-op for at least 15 years, lamb, garlic, and kernza, and now I have a wool product. I mean, granted, these are very small scale, but there's demand. There's some demand, and I get a check every 2 weeks. I'm selling something every 2 weeks. So there is that going on at the same time, much smaller scale than industrial grain. And there are producers much larger than I am who also do CSAs and farm and Des Moines Farmers Market. My friend Jordan Clausen and his wife Whitney, Grade A Farms. They have one of the biggest stands at at Farmers Market.
Yeah.
And they're young and they have strong backs and they can do it. I personally wouldn't be able to do it, but that robust system is out there. Ames has a very strong farmers market. Des Moines is worldwide known.
Yeah.
Also for the parade of dogs that comes through. But that's
I'm a dog
that's
person,
another
I'll allow
story.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for being on today. We're going to wrap up our episode with a segment we like to call Let's Whiteboard It. It's just our closing thought. So our question for today's segment is, what is one misconception that you would like to correct about farmers? And you can either write it or draw it.
Well, I want to say, I'll just repeat something.
Yeah.
That our current system, our industrial grain production system, has in it very hardworking, efficient, highly productive producers in it, and they're not to blame for all of our water quality problems. They're a part of the picture,
Yeah.
but there are other actors out there that need to carry blame also.
Yeah. Absolutely. How about you, Nick?
So, one, this definitely will take time. This is not, I think you said it earlier, you're not going to turn this on a dime. It's going to take time and effort to do this. And by the way, farmers want this too. I mean, let's not act like farmers are the ones that are resisting all of this. There are some, sure, but there are some in every population you want to segment out. So some of this stuff is things that farmers are very much willing and wanting to do as well. But we also have to keep putting food on our table as well. And you talked a little bit about what the conditions are for some of these farmers right now. It's not real great, and there's going to be a lot of people that are farming this year that are not farming next year. And when you're trying to battle that, and oh, by the way, there's pressure that we want you to do this, and we want you to do all of these things, and you're like, I'm I'm trying to keep my family legacy alive.
Right.
I have to kind of prioritize that. And that sounds uncaring, but it's not. Farmers want to do these things as well.
Right. Yeah.
But we have to make sure that we're still in business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote the easy button, that the misconception is that there is an easy button.
Yeah.
And then I have these little squigglies, and there's that article from the 70s, Wicked Problems. So every time you solve for one, you create
another.
others.
Yeah.
And so this is not an overnight deal, nor is it easy. So
Absolutely.
well, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on, and we're going to have you guys come on again because we haven't even gotten into specialty markets and things like that.
Yeah.
So we want to know
We
more
need to
about
talk
that.
more about Kernza.
But having you here and having the dialogue back and forth, I think for our listeners is going to be very illuminating of there isn't just one side, there's multiple, and there's multiple paths too to solutions. So thank you so much for what you do and for coming on today. We really, really appreciate it. And we can't wait to have you guys back out and keep doing what you're doing. So
Thanks for having us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll see you next time.